Hello pals, welcome back to the channel. So this is a big one. This took a hell of a lot of work. I feel like I say that at the start of every video, but really this one takes the biscuit. So what's this about? Well, the reason I made this is because I can't help but feel in ufology that we have a kind of generational amnesia in that I'm sure Arrow contributed to it when they said that there was no case worth investigating prior to 2007. Well, I would say that the further back you go, the less kind of digital noise there is, the less chance it is that it was a drone or anything like that. And there seems to be a real focus on the big podcasts and, your places like Joe Rogan and stuff to only really listen to rightly listen to, but only listen to people like pilots and military experiences and intelligence guys. I think Grant Cameron put it really well when he said this.
So if you're a fighter pilot who's seen a light in the sky, that's big news. Everybody's talking about it. But if you're a contactee, they basically say to you, take a couple steps back, move away, or we'll bring out the cross and the nails. The contactees in the UFO community are basically the illegal immigrants of the UFO world. They basically nobody wants anything to do with them, and they basically figure it's anecdotal. Anything other than that is not.
Here's a weird quote for you. So Stalin said that quantity has a quality all of its own. And I collected all of these accounts of sightings at schools over the years. And I won't go through them all, but just out of morbid curiosity, I added up how many witnesses there were. And obviously, this is very vague, very rough, but it came out at 4,520. So, going off the logic that if one of these is an accurate description of what these kids are encountering, then it is incredibly profound and changes the course of human history. So, what I'm going to do, first of all, let me say I am not taking too much credit for this because this is largely taken from Eyes on Cinema on YouTube for the actual video clips of these encounters. But the vast amount of the work was done by incredible ufologist Preston Dennet. And this is his book, all about schoolyard encounters. His YouTube channel is fantastic. And if you want more detail on these cases, because I'm going to rip through and give you the highlights, I really, really cannot recommend his channel enough. Also, the UFO History channel, which is relatively new and brilliant. And the UAP files, because some of the Broadhaven and some of the other footage, which was really obscure, Jimmy sent me on that. So nice one to everybody that I've referenced in this. So I've wasted enough of your time. I've started with an overview of sightings. After that, I go into landings and interactions with the kids. And don't worry, I'm not going to bang on for 40 minutes about the Ariel School because there's literally hundreds of cases here. Let's get into it. So, just in case you're unfamiliar with close encounters and that classification, CE1 is visual sightings of an unidentified flying object which appears to be less than 500 feet away, that shows an appreciable angular extension and considerable detail. So basically a sighting of something weird that isn't too far away. CE2 is where a physical effect is alleged. So it can be where people have sunburn, or it will leave imprints on the ground, or a funny smell, or a vibration which affects things, that kind of thing, a physical trace. And like I said, the first half of the video is really going to focus on these types of sightings, and the second half is going to be more close contact. So the first school account of UFOs was from 1853, and I thought I'd include this because this is 80 years before the Foo Fighters burst onto the scene and became sort of well known. but they were seen above a school for 20 minutes. 1950 Kentucky, 35 kids saw 3 very loud roaring UFOs who buzzed the playground, flew very low over the top, but were later joined by 4 more of these noisy orbs, meaning that there were 7 in total. 1950 in Minnesota, 150 kids saw what they described as a huge floating mirror above their schoolyard. In 1950 Illinois, classic flying saucer hovers over the playground for 10 minutes. 51 Kansas, kids and teachers from the whole school watched a saucer all lunchtime, which left when they went back to lessons. In 1952 in Glasgow in Scotland, a saucer hovered over the playground before tilting on one side and speeding away. I included that detail because if you've seen the gimbal video, that's extra relevant now with that hindsight. 1952 in France, 23 kids and their teacher saw a hovering cylinder and orbs which tilts and drops angel hair before flying away. Don't worry, we're going to get onto that in a second. In 1953, the same saucer as appeared the year before in Glasgow returned above the dormitory at the same school that it appeared a year previously. And in 1954 in Ohio, a saucer hovered over a schoolyard and jettisoned angel hair over a 3-mile radius, which was later investigated by the Air Force. So, angel hair I haven't really described before in any of my videos, so I may as well interrupt myself now and just go into it, because this is a thing which is ubiquitous with the UFO phenomena and appears all through history, all around the world. There's some very famous cases from Russia, but lots from America. Now, this is where, after the appearance of a UFO, there is found a very fine filament which drops down from the air. And it's often mistaken for spider webs because it looks very much like when spiders are in breeding season, certain types of them can essentially float on a very long, thin strand of web, and it looks very similar. However, it does have some unusual properties and has been repeatedly tested and found not to be that, most importantly. But once it's in contact with skin, it tends to go very gelatinous or turn to liquid and then evaporate, which leads me to speculate. So I've seen a couple of people talking about this, but not really put it very clearly. So what I think this represents is a change in a state of matter. So plasma is the 4th state of matter. You've got solids, liquids, gas, and plasma. And very much in the way that on a plane's wing, if you see one perform a hard turn, you will see big puffs of water vapor appear as the air is compressed or cools. One of the two. It forces it back towards a liquid state from a vapor. And I think that the same is a potential for plasma. So whatever these things are, Eamon Ansbro has suggested that plasma is a form of life and therefore certainly accounts for some UAP. And therefore, if you had some method of plasma cooling and becoming a liquid, you would get a sort of candy floss effect as this sort of residue dripped away. So in fact, watch how somebody makes candy floss and I think you'll understand what I'm talking about.
Candy floss instantly. Pretty cool, huh? We get these amazing, very fine, sugary strands, almost like cotton wool.
And that then explains how, when it's left in a human hand and warmed or out in the sun, it eventually turns back to a gaseous state and dissipates. All right, so let's get back to the 50s. So in 1954 in Argentina, 400 children and their teachers observed a hovering craft during lunchtime break. In 1955 in Tennessee, 30 kids and their teacher witnessed a craft over the playground. 1955 in North Carolina, 120 kids and the principal, who was a trained observer and a World War II veteran pilot, saw 7 metal spheres for 40 minutes. More angel hair was dropped and was sent to Burlington Laboratory. In 1956 and 7, there were multiple sightings in Tennessee, Pennsylvania, Brazil, Ireland, Alaska. In 57, New Zealand, 30 kids saw a silver cigar shape perform an aerobatic display. In 1957, the same school, 2 weeks later, this time 130 kids and 3 of their teachers saw the same craft. The same year in China, a glowing orange fireball, very much like the one seen around Malmstrom Air Force Base, was seen hovering over the school before a very fast retreat over the horizon. 1957 was a major, what they call a flap. 1958 in Hartford, UK, a classic saucer witnessed by kids during playtime. 1959, New Jersey, a school football match was interrupted for 10 minutes by some orbs that put on a dazzling aerial display. And in 1959, in Canada, for 6 days in a row, craft arrived back during break times and hovered only 20 feet above school grounds.
Saw this thing go over, what they call the thing, you know, and it was exactly like a railway carriage, you know, lit up. It started up overhead there, and I saw it and watched it right out of sight, right over the hills.
But I looked in that direction, there was a silver plane and a pink one, like a, between a pink and a red cerise colour then, right side by side. And they were in that direction, and there was no cloud, but I don't know where it went to.
In 1960 in Scotland, a craft was sighted 100 feet above the playground, hovering silently. The same year in Pennsylvania, a craft matching exactly the same description acted in exactly the same way. In 1962 in Argentina, 180 students and 3 teachers saw a group of 3 craft performing aerobatics above the playground. In 1963 in California, 30 kids saw a 40-foot orange orb during lunchtime. I can't help but be reminded of the Malmstrom Air Force case and several other ones involving nuclear facilities, where they in particular described large orange orbs. In 1964 in Albuquerque, 20 kids saw an egg-shaped craft over the playground, very reminiscent of the Trinity case as written about by Jack Vallee. This is fascinating though, because one child, Sharon Stull, had a fascinating encounter. She stood underneath this, watching it, and following the event had some incredibly strange physical effects. I'm going to cover them at the end of this slide. This was also linked in terms of time and locality to the very famous Lonnie Zamora case. In 1966, in Massachusetts, there were 2 sightings in one day. So Beverly High School saw 3 metallic objects, which were also witnessed by teachers and police. They were hovering silently. They then flew directly from there to the Gordon College and were witnessed by students there. Project Blue Book investigated and concluded that it was Jupiter. Now, listen, that's just silly, and I have a very low tolerance for this kind of cover-up nonsense. So this is what Jupiter actually looks like.
So if I zoom out now, slowly, till about there, you can see in the bottom right hand corner a small speck. Now I'm going to focus the camera on this speck. So that bright object there, which looks like a star, is actually Venus. And if I just zoom in on there, just to make it slightly larger, there, you can see it's very bright and very large, but it's too close to be a star. So that is Venus. Now if I zoom out, so there's the moon in the top left hand corner, there's Venus. Now at the bottom you can see another faint object, which is the planet Jupiter.
So, I mean, if you think that looks like 3 metallic objects hovering over one school before flying to another one, then I don't really know what to say. What I do want to just cover, though, is the Sharon Stull case. This is a newspaper article from that particular time. It says that she grew 5.5 inches in a month following her encounter, where she had second-degree burns to her face from sort of intensive sunburn from standing under this orb. And her mum also said that she matured during this time. So she went from playing with dolls to wearing dresses and cleaning the house, and it had a really, really profound effect on her development. So fascinating.
It resembles something like a comet, but comets are white, so this one was orange, oval colour, so it certainly wasn't a comet.
Okay, back to the 60s. In 1967, at an unknown location, 6 teachers that were on a break from a meeting at Hotchkiss High School saw a hovering ball of light outside. 1967 in Illinois, 40 kids, 3 nuns and a police officer, which sounds like the setup to a joke. They saw a glowing ball of light. William Fisher, who was one of the witnesses, then went on to dedicate the rest of his life to becoming a very accomplished UFO investigator. In 1967 in Pennsylvania, during a full city power outage, the principal, teachers and all kids saw 3 objects hovering above their schoolyard, whether or not those two were related. 1967 in Venice, California, 20 kids saw an object during the break time. In 1967 in Texas, 100 children saw a large cylinder craft which deployed smaller light orbs. Almost all of the witnesses suffered missing time and memory loss, and they only remembered this event years later during various reunions. That is another recurring factor to do with lots of these observations, which leads me to think that perhaps a great deal more occur than are even remembered and recorded. In 1968 in Utah, 21 children and their teacher saw a hovering object, and this is important because it's also very close to Skinwalker Ranch.
And what did it look like?
Like a saucer.
Yes. And were there any lights or anything around?
No, it was just a white object of this style. We were busy in here, but we had to come back in. But the 3 soldiers that were there with us, they also saw it. And they described it more or less like a lampshade.
Okay, into the 70s. So, in 1970 in New York, the entire school, I'm not sure how many, and several teachers saw a large silver spinning pyramid appear above the playground. And in 1970, the same year, so this was obviously another one of these flap years where there's lots of contacts and global observations. 400 kids and 2 teachers saw a giant black silent craft appear over the school. It then turned on its side and shot off with incredible speed. Apparently it was silent as well. The 70s was also the start of the triangular UFO sightings, which I documented in the 100 Years of History video. The same year, South Carolina, 50 girls saw a large classic saucer moving slowly, which shone down a beam of light on the playing field. 1973 in LA, students saw 3 grey saucers being chased by a police helicopter. Same year in Rhode Island, a large metallic object 150 feet above the school was witnessed by the whole school, and many reported feeling tired and sick afterwards, which is a common side effect of radiation poisoning or exposure. In 1973, Pasadena, 70 kids saw a silver disc with portholes in, which vanished in a bright flash of light, similar to the Jerusalem case, if you know that footage. And in 1974, an unknown location, because I couldn't figure out where it was, at a university, girls heard a loud explosion. They ran outside and saw a star-shaped craft deploying orbs of light. It flew around in a kind of Brownian motion and then departed all in different directions.
I had a camera with me. I was taking it down to my sister who wanted to borrow it. And, well, as I say, I just had the camera with me. And pure luck, I just undid it and took a picture.
The object was staying still all this time, was it, or was it moving?
No, it was moving.
But moving slowly?
It was moving fairly fast. I wouldn't like to say how fast, but I couldn't say how fast.
Now, some people have said that when they try to take a picture of one of these things, there's been some mysterious force or radiation that stopped the camera from working. Did you find this?
It didn't stop my camera from working.
Have you had people say that this picture is a fake?
Of course I have, yes. I mean,
what do you say to them when they say that?
they're entitled to their own opinion. I know it's not a fake. It doesn't really bother me what other people think.
In 1975 in Zimbabwe, 60 kids and teachers saw a large metallic cylinder above their school for 3 hours. Zimbabwe, obviously the same country as the Ariel School sighting later in history. In 1977 in Eastbourne, 2 UFOs were seen through the classroom windows by a whole class of kids and their teacher. In 1977, the Warminster Thing, which is what that previous clip was from, where a black donut-shaped UFO was seen by kids and teachers. This is an incredibly well-known case now. There's a couple of videos from witnesses of this following this slide. It was seen all over the town, and there was lots and lots of different witnesses. It really, really rocked the area. Same year, so look at all of these ones from 1977. In Wales, kids and teachers saw a silver cigar shape with a black dome on top for 10 minutes. 1977 California, kids saw a silver sphere in the playground that left at the end of break time, so appeared to be observing them at play. Indiana, 3 boys saw a gigantic 300-foot triangle. One of them fell over whilst watching it. So obviously this is kind of peak black triangle sightings, this and the 80s. In Upton, in Wales, kids all saw a UFO hovering above the trees. The teachers separated them and got them all to draw it, and all of their drawings were of the same thing. 1977 Arizona, a silver silent disc was putting on an aerobatic display above a school. 1978 in England, a saucer hovered 20 feet above the playground at St. Mark's School. And in 79 North Carolina, a saucer above a school for the deaf. The teachers reportedly thought it was flying that low that it would crash. Now, fascinatingly, it hovered over the school and emitted low-frequency waves that even the profoundly deaf kids were able to perceive. It was very palpable to them. They picked up on the vibration, and from the strength of the throbbing, they could point out the direction and get a bead on where the craft was. It's fascinating, almost as if it knew its audience.
A few miles outside Warminster is the Elizabethan mansion of Longleat. Nigel Mingay, the son of Lord Weymouth's butler, describes the thing as it came his way.
Well, I was out one night, and a friend who I know, who lives just across the road, he said he'd seen it. Well, I didn't believe him, but he told me to come out, so I went out with him, and we walked around for about half an hour, and then we were sort of looking around the sky the whole time, hoping to see it. We were just on the verge of coming in when we saw it, and it went right across the horizon.
Yes, where did it go exactly?
Well, if I can show you just out here, it appeared from behind this tree and went right over the sky and disappeared just before it got to that tree.
And what did you feel like when you saw it?
Well, I was surprised, not shocked, but I always had an open mind about it. But now I believe in it.
The chap here in the blue sweater, now you've got a good view of it. What do you think it was?
I think it was a spaceship.
A spaceship?
Yep.
Why do you think that, in all seriousness?
Well, it had a hole through the middle, but it was sort of hard around the edge outside. The clouds couldn't pass through the outside of it. Could go through the middle, though.
Have you ever seen anything like it before?
No. Not nothing like that.
And how long were you able to see it?
I was up in the window, I saw it about 3 minutes.
3 minutes?
Yeah.
Was it sort of hovering, or...?
No, it's just going around like a wheel. Just going over.
Now, you got a good view of it. Describe it to me.
Well, it was sort of blackish grey wing going across the sky, and it was dark on one side, and in the bottom it had a sort of little line through it, and it was moving across the sky slowly, and then it disappeared behind a tree.
Miss Green, did you see the phantom object yourself?
I saw it, yes.
Now, how would you describe it?
Very much as the children did, as it appeared to be a smoke ring. That's the best way that I can describe it, as a smoke ring.
Any theories as to what it
No
might be?
theories at all. None at all.
I mean, obviously people are going to speculate men from Mars or what have you. I mean,
the only thing I can say really is that I'm glad there were a lot of other people saw it at the same time as I did.
In 1982 in Texas, during a sports day, multicolored craft, so think Close Encounters of the Third Kind, appeared and put on an aerial display above the playing field whilst the events were going on. Students experienced high static electrical activity. Hair was standing on end and they were zapping each other when they touched each other. The US Air Force visited the next day, and following this visit, the principal announced to the whole school that it was a free light show that he'd kept secret. In 1989 in France, a gigantic black triangle appeared above the school. Students only remembered this years later when speaking during various reunions. In 2009, North Carolina, during a school brass band practice, a fleet of UFOs arrived and gave aerobatic displays. 2 days later, one of the witnesses had the same craft appear above their home. And in 2018 in Indonesia, a very brightly glowing object was sighted above the schoolyard, which was witnessed by children and teachers.
Since last week's report by 2 Aldridge policemen that they saw an unidentified flying object, hundreds of viewers have written or phoned to say that they'd seen similar things. One of the most interesting reports came from a Girl Guides camp near Droitwich. They were camped next to the field in which I'm standing, and they say that they saw what they think was a flying saucer hovering over this field for nearly an hour. Mrs. Olive Granger was one of the guide leaders.
Mrs. McGowan, she's the guide at Fort Dudley. We were having a last cup of cocoa round the campfire in the kitchen. The guides were in bed, and suddenly there was this terrific roar. And we looked up, and the shape, it seemed to be just a straight line with flashing lights, was coming towards us. We ducked, and this thing swerved and went into the meadow, the next meadow, which is about 50 yards away from where we were. And by this time, Miss Hare had joined us, and 2 guides had come up to the kitchen, and we just watched this thing hovering.
What did you think it was when you first saw it coming towards you? What was your first impression of it?
I thought it was an aircraft out of control, and I thought that it was going to land on the campsite.
You thought it was going to crash
Yes,
into
we
you?
really did. We were very frightened. We didn't hear it coming at all. We just heard this terrific roar, looked up, and there it was.
And what impression did you get over in the meadow? What shape did it appear to be then, when you could have a good look at it?
It seemed to be a circular shape. We didn't see it all round it. We just saw the one side of it, and we just saw lights.
You got the impression that it was round, though, did you?
Yes. Oh, yes. Yes, it hadn't got any wings at all. It wasn't an aeroplane, I'm sure of that.
Did anyone try to go and have another look at it, a closer look at it?
Miss Hare wanted to go, and Mrs. McGowan was terrified, and I was frightened as well. But she would have gone if somebody had gone with her, but we were just scared. She did go to the manor to try and phone, but everybody was asleep, and we didn't want to disturb them, because Lady Sands lives in the manor on her own. We didn't want to frighten her, and we just couldn't get in touch with anyone else.
What did you think it was?
Well, it wasn't an aeroplane. Definitely wasn't an aeroplane, and it was either something from outer space, or it was something that they're developing. You know, the hush-hush they don't want us to know about.
And how high above the ground was it hovering?
Well, when it was coming over us, it wasn't very high at all. It was about house high. But when it was in the field, it was quite close to the ground. I should say about 30 feet off the ground, not more than that.
Do you think you're an imaginative woman? And have you ever thought about flying saucers before now?
Well, no. We just haven't thought about them. I always said that if I saw one, I would believe in them, and until I did see one, I wouldn't. And I'm convinced that we saw something there was definitely something there.
Okay, well, you've made it into the really weird stuff. So the following cases are all either CE3, which is encounters with entities, or accounts which feature the craft actually landing at the school. So these account for around 40% of different school encounters, but rather than smash half an hour of different rapid fire statements, what I've chosen here is some of the more interesting ones, and we're going to go into a little bit more detail about a few specific cases, as I think there's a bit more data to be gleaned. So here we go. Okay, so this case is from 1972 at the Rosemead School in South Africa. The school was closed because it was a Saturday, but the principal lived next door, and he saw bright lights, very much like the craft from Close Encounters of the Third Kind, land in some wire fence and locked tennis courts. A police patrol vehicle was watching from a distance at the same time. Also that had seen the craft were oil field guards who saw bright lights flying over in the direction of the school. Following the event, the gum tree in front of the school had withered and died, potential effect of radiation. And upon inspection, the tennis courts were absolutely destroyed. And I've got a photograph from the local paper of those tennis courts. And again, they were fenced and locked, which makes this interesting. So this case is absolutely classic. 1966, Hillsdale College in Michigan. Initially seen by 6 witnesses from their dorm room, a video of which will follow this slide. Later seen by 80 plus witnesses and local police. A craft was seen to land in a grove of trees. There they are again, this is a real theme, in front of the college. And there was so much attention from the local press and whatnot that Operation Blue Book attended to do an investigation. And after 3 days of interviews, Alan Hynek called a press conference, and one of his suggestions, which was blown out of proportion, but it was still something he was suggested, was swamp gas, which has now become infamous and probably haunted the rest of his career. He later referred to this event as the low point of his career. And it caused such a huge amount of humiliation that Gerald Ford later called for a congressional investigation, the outcome of which was the end of Project Blue Book. Now, Hynek, as is well known, started off as a bit of a naysayer and skeptic, but by the end of his time studying Blue Book became quite the convert and ended up studying UFOs. He even featured as a brief cameo in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the movie. But this is a case which really, really deserves further investigation.
But here in Hillsdale, a Michigan county seat town and the home of Hillsdale College, 87 co-eds aren't sure. They say that together, on a Monday night in early April, they watched a craft of some kind for several hours.
Well, about 11:20 or so, I was in this room, and there'd been a thunderstorm outside, and several of us were watching what was left of the storm. It had actually ended about 10:30, but we were watching, the light rain outside, and we saw a bright white light right over there. You can see out the window. And at first we thought it was a house because it was so luminous and so bright. It was a big light. And then about 15 minutes later it changed color. It was red. And then it went back to white, and then it moved up, just like this level. The light stayed in the same position. And then a green light came on. And all the time when all the girls were running to the windows looking, all I kept wanting, what is it? We weren't scared at all. We just wanted to know what it was. And the police cars, as they headed down the road, their headlights were aimed in the direction of 3 lights that we saw. At this point, the red light and the green light went out, and the white light became very, very dim. And the object went way down into the trees. And it was almost completely invisible. We had to strain our eyes to see it. You know, now, many people said, well, it probably is some kind of a weather balloon or something, but actually, I think the opinion of many people was that it was from somewhere outside our universe. There was only once that I thought I saw a shape, and it was a disc-shaped, there was a silver reflection. And as I said, the lights were going like this. Now there's an airport beacon light over to the right. It was over to the right and above the object. And it appeared to us that this thing was trying to get up through the light. And it would go up, and then when the light would come back around to where it would go down again. And it was moving back this whole time. And as I said, it was a very brilliant green. It wasn't like an airplane light or a light you see on a neon sign.
Maybe it was unmanned, maybe there was something in it. My opinion is that I thought there was probably somebody in it coming down to check, to see the environment, to see if possible if they could get out, and just looking around, looking at the trees and stuff. Maybe they don't have trees, maybe they don't have this. And it's also, I mean, why should we be egotistical enough to think that we are the only people in the universe?
Since then, it seems like everything that we've said and everything that other people have said, they seem to try and whitewash it, cover it up. And I don't know, I don't really think it's a government project or anything like that. But if it is something from another planet, I think they're trying to keep it fairly quiet.
This is Hillsdale, and the girls at Hillsdale College had a night to remember.
Well, when I was looking out the window with binoculars, I guess it was about 12, I saw it, and I saw two red lights, and I saw what looked to be shaped like a pie. I could just see the front of it, and I just saw the round front, and I could see the lights on either side. And then the red light was sort of casting a glow over the whole thing, so it looked like a round disc.
At first, when I'd heard the other girls talk about it, I believed them, yet I couldn't really make myself comprehend it because I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. But then when I saw it, I just was fascinated. I wasn't afraid. I just wanted to stay there and keep my eyes glued to it. I couldn't leave.
I know I saw it, but, and I know myself I saw it, but I believe I saw it, but I can't fathom it because it seems so unreal.
We was going out State Street, and we was not really looking for anything in particular, but there was we thought it was an airplane coming, and it was coming towards us, and we kept our eye on it, and as we went out, it kept coming lower and lower till we thought we better stop because we were going to miss seeing what it was. And as we stopped, the object got real low, even with us building.
At one point, I thought it was going to come towards the car, but it was about 200 yards from us, maybe 225. And, not yards, feet, excuse me. And it was behind there was this meatpacking house. And it seemed to just disappear right behind that because we backed up. And just that quick, it was gone. I don't know what happened to it. It's really extraordinary.
It was blue, maybe 3 lights, blue with a white in it, and right down the middle was little red dots. And it was as big as an airplane, but I would say it was more like a helicopter without the propeller.
No, I don't think I was scared. I was just amazed. You don't think about, oh, let me get my camera or something like that. You just sit there with your mouth open. And what is it? And I thought it was a helicopter. No noise or anything. It just seemed like a glider, gliding plane, just gliding along. No noise at all.
It didn't do anything. It would just glide so easy and just smooth, and it just kept going real smooth. It didn't go up or down. It just stayed on an even pace.
This is a photograph taken of the craft from that time, followed by a local newspaper report and one talking about Hynek's announcement about swamp gas, and then an interview with the man himself where he describes the phenomena.
I've had many letters pointing out that they, as children on the farm, had many experiences with swamp lights, and that this was obviously the thing that it was, and they couldn't understand why the people in Michigan got so excited over swamp lights. And the illusion of motion frequently is given by the fact that a little bit of swamp light appears here, it goes out, another one appears over here, that goes out then, but the illusion as viewed from a distance is that the objects have moved back and forth. And sometimes this gas will gather into a ball and actually float away.
Well, of course, by the time I arrived, the situation was so charged with emotion that it was impossible for me to do any really serious investigating. I had to fight my way through reporters to interview the witnesses. Well, the pressure was mounting for an official explanation. There were more than 60 newsmen jammed in at that news conference. I gave what I thought to be at that time the only scientific explanation possible for the faint lights in the swampy area. I made the statement that it could be swamp gas, and even though I went on to emphasize that I couldn't prove it in a court of law, that was the full explanation for these sightings. Well, the press picked up the phrase swamp gas and rushed off to the telephones, and I was to come into a great deal of criticism over it.
Well, good. It was deserved. Does this really look like swamp gas to you? And here's a picture of him in his cameo in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Another amazing case from history. From 1966, the Westall School landing in Melbourne, Australia, where between 200 and 300 children and a couple of teachers saw up to 3 craft land in a grove of trees at the side of the school. They were circled by 5 Cessna aeroplanes, which implies that somebody else knew what was going on. It was shown to tilt on one side when departing, like the gimbal. The police, press and military all arrived to speak to the students or teachers. The kids were briefed in the school gymnasium not to spread rumours or talk about what had happened. Pictures taken by one of the teachers were confiscated, and landing marks seen at the scene were ploughed over to have them destroyed. This has been the feature of some brilliant documentaries, one of which was by Ross Coulthard. I've got a couple of clips. I can't show you much because I get copyright struck, but it's an absolutely amazing case and it's never been debunked.
Can you tell me about the day that it happened? So from the very first thing you remember, like what was the weather like, what were the sights?
It was it was the 6th of April 1966, and it was a Wednesday, and I was in science class. The weather was quite clear, it was a blue sky, it was coming up to Easter, our Easter break from the end of the week, and I was in science class, and a student ran in, it was about 20 past 10 in the morning, just before morning recess, flung the door open and said, Mr. Greenwood, there's flying saucers in the sky, there's UFOs or things in the sky. And of course, we all just burst out laughing, yes, right. Anyway, it was nearly the end of the period, so he said, well, and then the person, it was a girl, ran off. Anyway, he said, okay, well, come on, we'll pack up and we'll all go down and have a look. So we all packed up down the corridor, out the bottom of the steps, round towards the Oval. And there were all the kids running around and going crazy and whatever. I don't recall any of the sound at the time because once I got out onto the Oval and saw what I saw, I was absolutely transfixed. My whole vision was on trying to just look at what I was seeing in the sky and take in every single detail I could. I don't remember any of the noise. There was a lot of noise apparently because the kids were excited, some were frightened, whatever, but I can just remember standing there because I'd never seen anything like that before and I wanted to take in as much as I could because wow, this was just amazing, just amazing.
Can you describe the object in detail? So
well, I actually saw 3. Now there's a bit of, not so much controversy or whatever, but some people, we just wonder because of the movements that perhaps there was only 1 or 2 in the sky at the time, and because they moved so fast, it looked like there was more, but there were numerous circles on the ground later. So but they were like flying saucers, and that's what we used to call them in those days. In comic books and all that sort of stuff. That's what they were. They were flying saucers, so we called them flying saucers.
What are you the first to see that UFO hovering that day? What did you see?
I saw a shiny two-story disc. It certainly wasn't anything that we'd ever seen.
Okay, so I appreciate you probably know about this one. I covered it in my last video, which was the gold standard of UFO cases. I covered it in the 100 years of UFO history, and I'm not gonna retread that ground now. But I can't make a schools video without mentioning the most legendary school landing of all time, which was 1994, just outside Rua in Zimbabwe, where 62 children witnessed a silver craft surrounded by flying lights or orbs landing in the school grounds during their lunch break. The incident lasted about 20 minutes. There'd been lots of sightings locally for a couple of days prior to the event, and the occupants were seen to communicate telepathically with the school children. Absolute legend and huge hero of mine, John Mack, went to investigate, and all the children's stories were the same. I know it was quite a well-to-do private school, but there was lots of very diverse social groups, and I mean, teaching kids is like herding cats, and for them all to come out with such brilliantly detailed interpretations of the event is incredible. I really recommend that if you want a case that will stand the test of time, you check this one out. Now, whilst I did say I'm not going to re-hammer this point home, I did find this awesome clip on the amazing Eyes on Cinema. So again, their channel is amazing, and Preston Dennet, don't forget, what an incredible resource for this video. But check out this less known clip from that event.
So I went down to see what was happening, and I actually saw this craft in the trees, and it was like in a Milky Way pattern on it, like silver and green and that sort of colours. And then there was this little boy crying, so I went up to him to see what was wrong with him, and he said he was quite afraid of it. And then that actually made me quite afraid of it, because when somebody's afraid, I get afraid. And then I saw this person, and his eyes were like in a slant, like so, and his mouth was just like a line, like this. And then at the time, the teachers were in a staff meeting, so nobody actually went up to go and call the teachers, because I think they were too afraid and everything. So when the bell rang, because somebody eventually went up, one of the prefects went and said to one of our teachers, Mr. Vernon, please could we can you ring the bell, because there's quite a bit of a performance down there with all the kids running around. And then somebody from BBC came to us, and he went for a walk down there with us with a guide account. And actually on that piece of metal over there, we could stand up on it, and we could actually see a few burn marks. So he asked us, when we were walking down there with him, he said, please could you come down with us to go and have a look at the things. So when we walked there's about 6 poles, and if you have a look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there were burn marks actually on the ground. And then the heels there on the rock, the day that it happened, there was something glittering, like quite strongly. And then when we came back to school the next day, it was just gone. And also, when we went down with them, the burn marks were just gone. That's like a few minutes later.
How long did you observe this whole happening?
I think it was about 5.5 minutes when we went down there, because it was actually quite scary.
Guy has just one last mention of something very interesting here. Guy.
And Mrs. Stark, we used to go down there with our teacher, Mr. Vernon, just for a walk for our content studies. We've got a dam that's actually empty at the moment, and we go down there to get some clay and pieces of glass. It's actually quite interesting, because there's usually ants that crawl on us and bite us. And when we went down there with the BBC, we were walking around, and we came back, and there were quite a few antholes and antholes on the floor. There was not a single ant, and there were a few dead ones on the floor.
Could you tell me what you saw on Friday?
Well, we saw some people. There was a white one, a red one, and a black one. And the black one was sitting on the spaceship.
How do you know it was a spaceship? Wasn't it a helicopter or something like that?
Well, it looked like it was like glinting in the trees. Like it looked like roundabout like a disc, like a round.
And whereabouts was it?
Well, in the trees over there, between the poles.
And you say it looked like a disc. Are you sure it wasn't a Harrier jump jet or an aircraft?
No.
Something that the Zimbabwe Air Force
It was like
had got?
in a disc.
And what happened, Guy?
Well, it was just glinting in the trees, and there was a man, and he walked towards us, and he walked back again.
And what did he look like?
His face was like this, and his eyes were down here.
Like, what, further down his face?
Yeah, much further down than us, because our eyes are here, his are down.
And how close were you to him?
Well, I was at the back, because I had just been finished in the classroom, and I was quite at the back. So all the other kids were in the front.
You don't think it was somebody in fancy dress doing a prank or something? What about you, Ariana? Tell us what you saw.
Well, I saw the same as Guy, but I saw this like one under silver glittery thing. I saw this like black long. It looks like a stick, but it was very thin.
It was a man, was it?
I don't know what it was, but it was very thin. All I saw was like a long thing, and on a like a silver thing.
And he was very, very, very thin.
What? I mean, it wasn't. Do you think he was a sort of a black Zimbabwean man?
Well, not really. He wasn't very, very dark. He was quite lightish, and he was very thin. Not as.
And how tall about?
About, say there.
Just a bit taller than you.
Well, yeah.
And why do you think that this was something different? That this wasn't some helicopter from the Zimbabwe Air Force and just some guys playing a joke? Why do you think it was actually a UFO and possibly a spaceman?
It was just because somebody wouldn't just be playing around and just be on the ground all of a sudden.
Did it make any noise, this thing?
Not really. No.
And it landed. Something landed. Do you see it land?
No, it was in the trees over there, like in the trees, like glinting, and like there was somebody on the ground.
And then what happened?
And then he walked towards us, and he walked back again, and they just went.
How? How did they go?
It just went all of a sudden.
What, like a helicopter?
No, just went.
Which way?
More down into the valley.
At about what height?
Quite high, like.
And then what happened?
And then it didn't come back again.
And did you girls see that as well?
Yes. When I went home the day after this incident had happened, I told my mum, and she said, actually, I don't believe you, but I can't really say yes and no, but she said, I really don't think I believe you. And then she said, my dad came home and I told him all about this, and he said it was probably just a rumor. I felt really upset because I knew that it was true. I don't want to forget about it. I want to keep it in because I knew that it was true. And I want to talk to other people about it.
And the final case for this video is my favourite, and I think it's absolutely legendary. In fact, spoiler alert, I've been speaking to Jimmy from the UAP files, and we're going to try in the near future to actually go to Broadhaven and film a special and make a proper full-length documentary just about this case, because it is fascinating. So in 1977 in Pembrokeshire in Wales at the Broadhaven School, 16 children saw a 40-foot long silvery craft landing and take off in a grove of trees. An occupant in a blue silver suit got out with legendarily pointy ears, as you'll see in one of the kids' drawings, and was carrying a small camera-like object. Kids were later separated by the teacher and asked to draw and describe the event, and they all drew and described the same thing. The government and police didn't really try and show any overt attention, but the local residents signed a petition. They believed that strongly that this needed to be investigated. The Ministry of Defence denied investigating the event, but later in declassified documents it came out that in actual fact they had studied it with great interest.
Now, what do you make of this next story? An investigation has begun into a claim that something strange came out of the skies and landed in the Welsh village of Broadhaven near Haverfordwest. Whatever it was spotted 3 times by children from the local school, and now their reports are being investigated by the British Unidentified Flying Objects Research Association. Now, the children say the object had a large dome, it was cigar-shaped and was silver in colour. Well, to find out more, I've just been on the phone to their headmaster, Mr. Llewellyn.
I know that 16 children saw it.
And did they all see the same thing, do you think?
There's a common core of similarity between all their descriptions. I got them to draw and to write what they saw.
And do you believe it?
I believe that they saw something which is not common in the environment in which they saw it, but whether they've interpreted correctly, I wouldn't know.
Well, I saw the spaceship. I didn't see the man. The spaceship, it looked a cigar shape with a dome on it. It had a yellowy, orange to red light on the top of it.
How clearly did you see it?
Well, I couldn't see its face because it was too far away.
Oh, you say you saw a man as well, did you?
Yes.
And what about him?
Well, he was too far away to be seen as well.
My friend Philip here was trying to find a way over the stream, and I was looking at the bushes up the top of the trees. And then suddenly this silver cigar-shaped object seemed to pop up from behind the bushes and trying to take off. Then it disappeared again.
Are you sure it wasn't perhaps just a helicopter or an aircraft from the airfield near here?
A helicopter could land there, but that's private property over there. And if they landed there, they could be prosecuted. And with an aircraft, the only thing that could get in there was a Harrier.
Were you frightened at the time?
Yes.
Why?
Well, I thought there would be a whole arm inside there or something.
Now, I'll keep you updated with some plans for this documentary the closer we get to actually doing something about it. But for now, I would love it if you would leave me your opinions in the comments about what was your favourite cases or any others that you think deserve a deeper dive. And so, what do you think? Again, I'm not going to bring you any conclusions, but 4,500 testimonies have been squished into about the last hour of video for you there. So, surely, even if it's just one, that changes everything. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.